Q&A Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @Q&A Review, that is @ CUEANDREVIEW. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@qnreview.com. That is INFORMATION @CUEANDREVIEW.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
This is from the National on Friday the 21st of June, from the Culture section. Dear Scots, we love you. German newspaper praises Tartan Army. This article is written by Ross Hunter. A German newspaper has praised the conduct of the Tartan Army after thousands arrived into the city of Cologne. The Cologne-based daily paper Kölnische Rundschau published a story thanking Scotland fans for bringing good mood and party spirit to the city ahead of the match against Switzerland. An Instagram post with the message, "Dear Scots, we love you," was published by the paper on Wednesday and has garnered more than 3,000 likes. In particular, Scots were praised for helping an elderly resident across a city square. Pictures show two men in kilts and t-shirts holding umbrellas over the woman to protect her from the rain. Despite the bad weather and numerous rain showers, the mood remained good and there were no riots in the old town, the report said. For days, the Scottish fans have been delighting the crowd with their good mood and party spirit. The Tartan Army was also praised for celebrating local footballing legend Łukasz Podolski, who spent his early career playing for FC Köln. The article stated, the fans chanted Łukasz Podolski several times, including in front of the shops of his kebab chain Mangal Doner. Several comments confirm the infatuation with Scots amongst locals. A little loud and crazy, pleasant and considerate, matching Cologne, said one, while another read, the nicest and most relaxed fans I've ever met. That article was written by Ross Hunter. This is from the National on Friday the 21st of June, from the News section. E. coli outbreak. 86 people taken to hospital as cases slow down. This is by the PA Reporter. At least 86 people have now been admitted to hospital as a result of an E. coli outbreak linked to lettuce, though cases are slowing, health officials have said. New data from the UK Health Security Agency shows there have been 45 further cases of E. coli infection as of June the 18th, taking the total number of confirmed cases across the UK since the outbreak began to 256. All those who have been affected first developed symptoms before May the 31st. The UK HSA said, although the rate of cases has now slowed, we expect the figure to rise as NHS laboratories refer specimens to UK HSA for genomic sequencing, which can link cases to this outbreak strain. A number of food manufacturers have recalled sandwiches, wraps and salads sold in major supermarkets and retail chains over fears they are linked to the outbreak. The Food Standards Agency has said lettuce used in the products are thought to be the likely source of the outbreak. All the cases recorded involve Shiga toxin-producing E. coli 0145 STEC. Darren Whitby, head of incidents at the Food Standards Agency, said, several sandwich manufacturers have now taken precautionary action to withdraw and recall various sandwiches, wraps, subs and rolls as food chain and epidemiological links have enabled us to narrow down a wide range of food consumed to a small number of salad leaves that have been used in these products. This remains a complex investigation, and we continue to work at pace with the relevant businesses and local authorities to ensure necessary steps are being taken to protect consumers. Although we are confident in the source of the outbreak being linked to a small number of salad leaves, which we identified early on through extensive food chain analysis, work continues to identify the root cause of the outbreak with the growers, suppliers, and manufacturers so that actions can be taken to prevent a reoccurrence. We will remain vigilant until the root cause of the outbreak is confirmed, and we are keeping an open mind about possible causes of the outbreak. E. coli are a diverse group of bacteria that are normally harmless and live in the intestines of humans and animals. However, some strains produce toxins that can make people very ill, such as STEC. People infected with STEC can suffer diarrhea, and about 50% of cases have bloody diarrhea. Other symptoms include stomach cramps and fever. Symptoms can last up to 2 weeks in uncomplicated cases. Some patients, mainly children, may develop hemolytic uremic syndrome, which is a serious life-threatening condition, resulting in kidney failure. A small proportion of adults may develop a similar condition called thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, that's TTP. STEC is often transmitted by eating contaminated food, but can also be spread by close contact with an infected person, as well as direct contact with an infected animal or where it lives. People are advised to call NHS 111 or contact their GP surgery if they are worried about a baby under 12 months, a child stops breast or bottle feeding while they are ill, a child under 5 has signs of dehydration, such as fewer wet nappies, and if older children or adults still have signs of dehydration after using oral rehydration sachets. Help should also be sought if people are being sick and cannot keep fluid down. There is bloody diarrhea or bleeding from the bottom, diarrhea lasts for more than 7 days, or vomiting for more than 2 days. That article was prepared by P.A. Reporter. This is from The National, on Friday the 21st of June, from the news section. Historic Glasgow building to reopen after £4 million project. This article is written by Rebecca Newlands. An historic Glasgow library is set to reopen after a £4 million transformation project. Elder Park Library and Community Hub will welcome visitors through its new and improved doors from Monday, June the 24th. The upgrades include a full refurbishment of the interior and exterior, a new community kitchen, more toilets, improved baby changing facilities, and more bookable areas for people to use. First opening in 1903, Elder Park Library is an A-listed building protected by Historic Environment Scotland because of its architectural and historic interest. It is a much-loved and iconic piece of local history and was gifted to Govan by Mrs. Isabella Elder, the wife of Govan industrialist John Elder, who inspired the name of the nearby Elder Park. Her work as a philanthropist advocating for the people of Govan led to her becoming a legend in Glasgow's history books and being named one of the greatest Glaswegians. We previously reported that Glasgow City Council had approved plans for a revamp project in 2022. All of the building's new additions connect to a system which monitors temperature and ventilation, aiming to reduce its carbon footprint and improve the overall visitor experience and safety measures. The project has been delivered by Glasgow Life, who worked with Elder Park Housing Association, Elder Park Library and Community Hub. Andrew Olney, Director of Libraries, Sport and Communities at Glasgow Life, said, "Glasgow's libraries are highly valued by the people who use them, and this project ensures there is a modern, fit-for-purpose hub at the heart of the Elder Park community. The new-look facility offers visitors a welcoming space with free access to books, digital resources, information and support." Gary Dalziel, Chief Executive of Elder Park Housing Association, added, "Elder Park Housing Association is thrilled to see Elder Park Library and Community Hub opening after its extensive renovations. It will provide a stunning facility located in the heart of the community, which, as well as reinvigorating the use of the refurbished library, will also create a first-class new community hub, all located within a historic and much-loved building in the area. Elder Park Library and Community Hub will be open 6 days a week from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Mondays and 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Tuesday to Saturday. That article was written by Rebecca Newlands. This is from The National on Friday the 21st of June from the news section. Landmark court ruling throws new UK oil and gas projects into doubt. This article is written by Ross Hunter. A Supreme Court ruling has determined that emissions created by burning fossil fuels need to be considered when granting planning permission for new drilling sites. Campaigner Sarah Finch challenged Surrey County Council's decision to allow the expansion of an oil well site at Horse Hill, near Hawley, in Surrey in 2019. Finch, acting on behalf of Weald Action Group, argued that the environmental impact assessment carried out before planning permission was granted, which only took into account the impact of extracting the oil, should have taken into account the downstream emissions produced when the oil was burned. She challenged an earlier Court of Appeal ruling dismissing her case, having also lost a legal battle in the High Court. In a ruling on Thursday, Supreme Court justices ruled 3-2 in favour of allowing her appeal and quashed the decision to grant planning permission for the site. Speaking outside the UK's highest court in Westminster after the judgment, Finch described the ruling as a massive vindication of what we've been saying. She told reporters, "This means that in future, every fossil fuel development project that's of the size to meet environmental impact assessment requirements, they will have to assess the downstream emissions from the fuel when it's burned. That is going to make it a lot harder for anyone to open a new oil or coal field, and it has implications for some that have already been agreed, but are subject to legal challenges." Later describing the decision as a huge win, Finch continued, "In climate science we hear a lot about tipping points, Amazon deforestation, melting permafrost, things that accelerate global warming in an unpredictable and frightening way. I think today we've seen a tipping point in the other direction. No longer will any planning authority be allowed to wave through fossil fuel production without fully considering the climate impact. Together we have just made the future safer," she added. Friends of the Earth, which supported the legal challenge, said that the landscape surrounding planning permission for fossil fuel extraction has been fundamentally changed by the ruling. Katie DeCore, a lawyer for the campaigning group, said, "This historic ruling is a watershed moment in the fight to stop further fossil fuel extraction projects in the UK and make the emissions cuts needed to meet crucial climate targets. It is a huge boost to everyone involved in resisting fossil fuel projects." She continued, "This judgment will make it harder for new fossil fuel projects to go ahead. They can no longer claim that downstream emissions are someone else's problem. Now, when fossil fuel companies apply for planning permission, it follows from the Supreme Court's judgment that the end-use emissions must be considered by the planning authority. This is a stunning victory for Sarah Finch and the Weald Action Group, after nearly 5 years of grit and determination in going to court year after year against adversaries with far greater financial resources than they have. In the judgment, Lord Leggatt said, "It seems to me plain that emissions created by burning oil extracted at the site are effects of the project, and, as a result, it follows that the Council's decision was unlawful." In the ruling backed by Lord Kitchen and Lazy Rose, he continued, "The reasons accepted by the Council for excluding the combustion emissions from consideration and assessing only direct greenhouse gas emissions from within the well's site boundary are therefore demonstrably flawed." He added, "In my view, there was no basis on which the Council could reasonably decide that it was unnecessary to assess the combustion emissions." Lord Leggatt also said that he could see no reason why combustion emissions that will occur elsewhere as a consequence of the operation of a project to extract oil should be regarded differently from emissions generated by extracting the material. The Justice later added that while the law did not prevent planning authorities from approving projects which may harm the environment, the authority needed to reach a reasoned conclusion on the impact. But he said it was not a valid ground to argue that the oil being refined elsewhere before being burned meant it did not need to be considered by the Council as part of the environmental assessment. Under the plans, the oil well site, run by Horse Hill Developments, would have seen the fossil fuel extracted over 20 years, producing around 3.3 million tonnes of oil. That article was written by Ross Hunter. This is from the National on Friday the 21st of June, from the news section. Scottish universities hail Cairngorm's Capercaillie feeding trial. This article is written by Naira Chirawi. A feeding trial by researchers from 2 Scottish universities is helping to save the Scottish capercaillie from extinction. The diversionary feeding trial was launched in the Cairngorms with just over 500 of the birds left in the wild. The capercaillie is on the brink of extinction owing to its eggs and chicks being eaten by predators, including the protected pine marten. However, Scotland's capercaillie population has now seen an 83% increase in artificial nest survival, thanks to an innovative research carried out in partnership between the University of Aberdeen, the University of St Andrews, FLS, RSPB Scotland, NatureScot and Wildland Limited. Jack Bamber, PhD researcher from the University of Aberdeen School of Biological Sciences, who led the study, said, "Our idea was to fill the bellies of pine martens and other predators, like badgers, in capercaillie strongholds, predicting that once full of free food, they would no longer search for eggs." The research trial is the first of its kind to be launched and was carried out over 60 square kilometres of land, managed by the Cairngorms Connect partnership. Richard Mason, site manager at RSPB Scotland Abernethy, said it had been conceived, delivered, tested and rolled out on a landscape scale in less than 4 years. It has then had RSPB Scotland Abernethy Forest to see an increase in capercaillie numbers, added Mason. In partnership with land managers in the Cairngorms National Park, the trial saw the research team place 720 artificial nests filled with chicken eggs in historic capercaillie habitat. Half of the nests had diversionary feeding stations with deer carrions set up nearby, and the survival of the nests were monitored over an 8-week period. This increased the chance of a nest surviving by 83%, compared to nests without carrion available, added Jack. Kenny Cortland, wildlife ecologist with FLS and lead of the Cairngorms Connect Predator Project, said, Predators are an important part of Scotland's biodiversity, but they can have a negative impact on rare species in certain circumstances. This exemplary research has provided strong evidence that we can reduce the impacts of predators without resorting to killing them. FLS and other managers are now rolling out this diversionary feeding to help capercaillie. By placing artificial nests filled with chicken eggs and bordered with deer meat in strategic locations, this diverted predators from feeding capercaillie eggs and chicks. This discouraged them from foraging during the capercaillie breeding season, and hence the proven 83% nest survival rate. This non-lethal control of predation strategy proved to be a timely solution for conservation emergency, with implications for any place capercaillies call home, added Jack. This project was funded by NERC and the School of Biological Science at the University of Aberdeen, through the Scottish Universities Partnership for Environmental Research Doctoral Training Partnership, and Forestry and Land Scotland, with support from Wildlands Limited and RSPB Scotland. Due to its effectiveness, diversionary feeding is now being adopted by Forestry and Land Scotland, FLS, the RSPB Scotland, and other partners in Deeside as well. That article was written by Naira Chahawi.
This is from The National on Monday, 24th June 2024. From the Politics section. Brexit proved Scotland is in a Westminster knows best union, says Swinney. By Steph Brown. John Swinney has accused the Westminster establishment of having a know your place attitude towards Scotland, as he ripped into unionist parties for not acknowledging the devastating impacts of Brexit during the election campaign. In a speech at Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen, exactly 8 years on from the Brexit referendum result, the First Minister said the implementation of the UK's departure from the EU exposed the UK as not in a partnership of equal nations, and instead a Westminster knows best union. He insisted Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer were reinforcing this every single day of this campaign, adding that Scotland's voice was still being ignored. The result of the Brexit referendum and its fallout wasn't just about our relationship with Europe. It has told us something fundamental about the United Kingdom too, said Swinney. It demonstrated that the UK is not a partnership of equal nations. The fact that Scotland voted to remain mattered not one jot to Westminster. That's not equality, it's a know your place attitude. And the way Scotland is being treated over Brexit is symptomatic of a wider Westminster knows best union, whatever the cost to Scotland. Scotland's voice is still being ignored and our democratic choices are still disrespected. We see Westminster politicians take trips north of the border to sneer at the very idea Scotland can have a real, genuine influence at Westminster. That is the reality of his unequal union. The First Minister accused Labour and the Tories of a conspiracy of silence on Brexit, as he reeled off how the economy, NHS and education have been negatively impacted. He spoke of how the National Institute for Economic and Social Research had found the UK economy is already 2.5% smaller than it would have been if it had stayed in the EU, meaning around £69 billion had been wiped from the economy. For Scotland, Swinney said this meant a £2.3 billion loss in public revenue. He also spoke about how the loss of freedom of movement is making it harder to recruit staff for care homes, and how Brexit was causing problems for Scottish industries, citing estimations that red tape has cost Scottish salmon producers up to £100 million. When speaking about education, Swinney said the UK had committed an act of educational and cultural vandalism by pulling out of the Erasmus Plus scheme. He said through Erasmus Plus, students, staff and young people from EU countries get to experience other cultures and life abroad, improve their language and soft skills, improve their career opportunities and enhance their personal development. It's an opportunity no longer available to Scotland's young people because the Westminster parties are determined to continue with Brexit, whatever the cost. That is shameful. He insisted Scotland could benefit significantly from becoming independent and rejoining the EU, which would allow the country once again to be part of the single market and have access to EU trade deals. Swinney added, "We would have protection for the rights and interests of workers and their families, free from the threat of any future right-wing Westminster government. Our businesses would have the ability to attract and retain people from across the EU to remain competitive. We would be in partnership to combat crime with access again to the European arrest warrant. EU membership would mean the artists and creative professionals could move freely between Scotland and the rest of the EU without barriers like visa and customs requirements." Swinney insisted Scotland would also make an important contribution to the EU, helping to contribute to energy security and assisting the EU with reaching net zero goals because of its enormous renewable potential. The First Minister concluded his speech by saying he believed Scotland being independent and back in the EU would actually improve the country's relationship with the rest of the UK. He said, "Scotland could act as a bridge between the rest of the UK and the European Union. If a future UK government wanted a closer relationship with the EU, we would be a strong supporter and a source of help." Since the Brexit referendum, Westminster has frequently overridden the wishes of the Scottish Parliament in devolved policy areas. We could replace that trend with a genuine partnership based on equality. That article was by Steph Braun. This is from The National on Monday, 24th June 2024. From the News section. Drivers clocked going double the speed limit by cameras on M8. By Rebecca Newlands. Drivers were clocked doing up to 82 miles per hour when 40 mile per hour speed cameras were installed on the M8 near Glasgow. Average speed cameras have been enforcing the 40 mile per hour temporary speed limit on the M80 southbound, leading on to the M8 westbound between junctions 14 and 13 from April 2nd until June 17th. The cameras were removed last week following the completion of essential works by Amy. While they were active, a total of 5,158 speeding offences were recorded by Police Scotland safety cameras. With some motorists recorded travelling at speeds of up to 82 miles per hour, this is more than double the temporary 40 mile per hour speed limit. Following this recording, the force has issued a warning. A spokesperson for Police Scotland said, "At major roadwork sites, the road layout and temporary surfaces can change regularly, so it's critical that motorists drive at a safe speed. Those most at risk in the event of a collision at these locations are the road workers, as they have no protective shield to absorb energy from the impact." The task car has been shown to increase speed limit compliance and improve driver behaviour at locations where essential work is being undertaken. Even the smallest reductions in traffic speeds can deliver major improvements to road safety, and the average speed cameras assist in delivering a safer environment for all road users. That article was by Rebecca Newlands. This is from The National on Monday, 24th June 2024, from the News section. Paisley, fire service in update on ongoing fire at waste facility, by Xander Elliards. The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, or SFRS, has issued an update from the scene after a massive fire at an industrial estate sparked warnings for residents nearby not to go outside. A spokesperson for the service said they expected crews to remain on site on Burnbury Road in Linwood Industrial Estate in Paisley for an extended period of time after the blaze on Sunday night. Videos on social media showed huge clouds visible from miles around after a fire broke out at waste solutions company Enva's Waste Electrical and Electronic Equipment Solutions e-waste facility. On Monday morning, a warning to local residents to stay inside with windows and doors closed was lifted. However, by 2 p.m. on Monday afternoon, there were still 5 appliances on the scene battling the fire. A spokesperson gave the latest from the scene of the ongoing fire. They said, "As you can see, we've attended a very extensive fire involving a waste recycling centre. At the height, we had more than 10 fire engines, and that's in excess of 50 firefighters. We currently have 3 fire appliances and 2 high-reach appliances on the scene, and crews are currently making progress. It's been a very challenging incident, difficult conditions, and a very extensive fire. We expect to be here for an extended period of time, and I'd like to thank the public and partners for their continued support." In a statement, Enva said, "We would like to apologise to local residents and businesses for any inconvenience caused and kindly ask them to follow any advice issued by the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service. There have been no injuries, and the cause of the fire will be the subject of an immediate and thorough investigation. We will be contacting any customers impacted as soon as possible to ensure continuity of service. Our Linwood General Waste Recycling Facility, whilst unaffected by the fire, will remain closed until the emergency services cordon is lifted and operational responsibility for the site is returned to Enva. We would like to thank the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and the police for their extremely prompt and professional response." The Scottish Environment Protection Agency also sent officers to the scene. SEPA National Deputy Manager Judith Moore said, "Following initial reports at about 11 p.m. on Sunday evening of a significant fire at Linwood Industrial Estate, Paisley, SEPA officers deployed and worked across the night to support SFRS as part of the multi-agency response." The SFRS said there are no reported casualties. That article was by Xander Elliards.
From The National, Tuesday the 25th of June, from the news section. Government destroys £1.4 billion of PPE bought by Tories in pandemic. Report by Xander Elliards. Scotland's Finance Secretary has condemned the appalling waste of public money after reports that the UK government had destroyed an estimated £1.4 billion worth of personal protective equipment, PPE. The items, which were all acquired by the Tory government in a single deal during the pandemic, have been destroyed or written off, it is understood. Figures published by the BBC showed there were at least 1.57 billion items of PPE provided by Northamptonshire supplier Full Support Healthcare that will never be used. The company struck a £1.78 billion deal with the government to supply face masks, aprons, eye protection and respirators in April 2020. According to the BBC report, this was the largest COVID-19 PPE order accounting for 13% of the government's total spend. Finance Secretary Shona Robinson said, "Wow, a new level of appalling waste of public money by the Tories." Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting said, "We know that billions of pounds were wasted during the pandemic through corruption and incompetence by the Conservatives, but this is the worst example I have ever seen. £1.4 billion on one contract, paying for PPE that was never used, and Rishi Sunak's fingerprints are all over it. That is money that could have been used to pay the salaries of 37,000 NHS nurses. It is a staggering waste, and we need a full and frank account as to how so much public money was thrown down the toilet." Over the course of 6 months, BBC Investigations made a series of Freedom of Information Act requests to NHS supply chain. The responses showed that of the 2.02 billion items of PPE provided by Full Support Healthcare, only 232 million items have been dispatched to the NHS or other care settings. It is understood about 749 million items have already been burned or destroyed, while a further 825 million are classified as excess stock. According to the report, the government had previously estimated about £85 million worth of PPE secured under the contract would not be used. The BBC understands that at least £100 million of additional public money has been spent on storing and incinerating the excess stock since its purchase. A Department of Health and Social Care spokesperson said, "We do not recognise the £1.4 billion quoted. Our position on PPE stock is set out in the department's annual accounts as audited by the National Audit Office. PPE was secured at the height of the pandemic, competing in an overheated global market where demand massively outstripped supply. Nearly half of all the remaining stock was sold, recycled or donated by the department. In line with our reduction of storage and disposal strategy, unused items will be turned into energy from waste, which will see the department recoup further losses." In January, Department of Health and Social Care accounts revealed that some £9.9 billion of the £13.6 billion spent on PPE had been written off as some items were defective or not suitable, while others will not be used before their expiry date. An accountability report by the National Audit Office said the department plans to dispose of nearly all of its current PPE stock held in warehouses and containers. At the time, Downing Street defended the losses by stressing the circumstances the COVID-19 pandemic caused, such as PPE being in short supply, leading to a hike in costs. And that article was by Xander Eliards. From the National, Tuesday the 25th of June, from the news section, Julian Assange leaves UK after reaching plea deal with US. Report by Gregor Young. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange has been released from prison and left the UK after reaching a plea deal with US authorities. Court papers filed by the US Justice Department show Assange is scheduled to appear in federal court to plead guilty to an Espionage Act charge of conspiring to unlawfully obtain and disseminate classified national defence information. It followed the publication of hundreds of thousands of leaked documents relating to the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. He will return to his home country of Australia after his plea and sentencing, scheduled for Wednesday morning local time in the Mariana Islands, a US Commonwealth in the Western Pacific. A plane carrying Assange left Stansted Airport on Monday before landing at a Bangkok airport for refuelling at around noon local time, 6 AM British Summer Time, on Tuesday. In a statement posted on Twitter/X just after midnight on Tuesday, the official WikiLeaks account said Assange was granted bail by the High Court in London and released from Belmarsh Prison on Monday morning after having spent 1,901 days there. The statement continued, he was granted bail by the High Court in London and was released at Stansted Airport during the afternoon, where he boarded a plane and departed the UK. This is the result of a global campaign that spanned grassroots organisers, press freedom campaigners, legislators and leaders from across the political spectrum all the way to the United Nations. This created the space for a long period of negotiations with the US Department of Justice, leading to a deal that has not yet been formally finalised. Video posted to Twitter/X by WikiLeaks showed Assange seated and dressed casually in jeans and a shirt, discussing the text on a sheet of paper. He is then shown walking up steps onto a Visa jet aircraft. Speaking of Assange's release, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese told the nation's parliament on Tuesday, "We want him brought home to Australia." He said, "I've been very clear as both the Labour leader and opposition, but also as Prime Minister, that, regardless of the views that people have about Mr Assange's activities, the case has dragged on for too long. There is nothing to be gained by his continued incarceration, and we want him brought home to Australia." Albanese added that the Australian diplomatic forces have engaged and advocated Australia's interest using all appropriate channels to support a positive outcome, which he took up early in his role after being elected Prime Minister in 2022. He added, "I will have more to say when these legal proceedings have concluded, which I hope will be very soon, and I will report as appropriate at that time." A letter to the United States Chief Judge of the District Court of the Northern Mariana Islands, Ramona V. Manglona, as seen by the PA News Agency, also confirmed Assange intends to return to Australia once proceedings conclude. The WikiLeaks statement also thanked all who stood by us, fought for us, and remained utterly committed in the fight for his freedom. It said, "After more than 5 years in a 2x3 metre cell, isolated 23 hours a day, he will soon reunite with his wife Stella Assange and their children, who have only known their father from behind bars." WikiLeaks published groundbreaking stories of government corruption and human rights abuses, holding the powerful accountable for their actions. As editor-in-chief, Julian paid severely for those principles and for the people's right to know. As he returns to Australia, we thank all who stood by us, fought for us, and remained utterly committed in the fight for his freedom. Julian's freedom is our freedom. In a separate post on Twitter/X, Mrs Assange said, "Julian is free. Words cannot express our immense gratitude to you, yes you, who have all mobilised for years and years to make this come true. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Assange's mother, Christine Assange, told Australia Sky News that she is grateful her son's ordeal is finally coming to an end. She said, "This shows the importance and power of quiet diplomacy. Many have used my son's situation to push their own agenda, so I am grateful to those unseen, hard-working people who put Julian's welfare first. The past 14 years have obviously taken a toll on me as a mother, so I wish to thank you in advance for respecting my privacy." Assange had been locked in a lengthy legal battle in the UK over his extradition, which saw him enter and leave the Ecuadorian embassy in London in 2012 before his detention in Belmarsh prison. In a January 2021 ruling, then District Judge Vanessa Baritzer said Assange should not be sent to the US, citing a real and oppressive risk of suicide while ruling against him on all other issues. Later that year, US authorities won a High Court bid to overturn this block, paving the way towards Assange's extradition. Assange was due to bring his own challenge to the High Court in London in early July, after he was recently given the go-ahead to challenge the original judge's dismissal of parts of his case. Assange has been in custody at Her Majesty's Prison, Belmarsh, for more than 5 years, fighting his lengthy legal battle against extradition to the United States. And that report was by Gregor Young. From the National, Tuesday the 25th of June, from the Politics section, exclusive. Labour's Jonathan Ashworth slated for BBC asylum seeker claims, by Steph Braun. Labour have been accused of having a broken moral compass after a senior figure refused to rule out sending asylum seekers back to Taliban-run Afghanistan. The party's shadow paymaster general, Jonathan Ashworth, insisted that the Tories' Rwanda scheme would not work as a deterrent to prevent people trying to come to the UK on BBC Newsnight. Instead, he said Labour are going to send people back to the countries from which they are fleeing. But he then proceeded not to engage with host Victoria Derbyshire when she repeatedly asked whether Labour would look to get a return agreement with the Taliban and with the Iranian regime, given figures show most asylum seekers arriving in the UK are from Afghanistan and Iran. After several attempts to get him to answer the question, he eventually said, "Well, you look at each one on its merits, obviously." Scottish Greens MSP Maggie Chapman described his comments as abhorrent and urged Labour to rule out the prospect of a returns agreement with these regimes immediately. She told The National, "The racist and anti-migrant policies are one of the worst legacies of this Tory government, and many of us are concerned that Labour will keep the vast majority of them in place. The fact they can't even bring themselves to rule out deporting the refugees to a Taliban-run Afghanistan tells us everything we need to know about the party's broken moral compass and its disregard for the right of some of the world's most vulnerable people. The Taliban is a vile regime with an appalling record. That's what every human rights group will say, and is the reason Labour gave for joining the disastrous 20-year war in Afghanistan. Now they want us to treat the same regime as a legitimate government. If Labour wants to have any credibility on human rights and internationalism, they will rule this out immediately and dismantle the hostile environment that has been built. NATO left Afghanistan in 2021, quickly leading to the Taliban taking back power in the country. The Taliban brought back bans on education for girls and laws stopping women from going to work. The Taliban also banned women's beauty salons, adding on laws that prevent women from being in public spaces like parks and gyms. The SNP's Stephen Flynn said that Labour were moving further and further towards a reform-inspired position on immigration. Former SNP MP Dr Philippa Whitford said the UK had treated people from Afghanistan appallingly, citing how the Ministry of Defence admitted earlier this month it was able to veto sanctuary applications from its Afghan counterparts to stop them coming to the UK. Whitford said Ashworth's comments did not convince her Labour were going to have an attitude any different to the Tories on immigration. Asked what she thought of Ashworth's comments, she told The National, "I think it's terrifying. The UK has appalling let down people in Afghanistan, including people who have worked with the British Army, in abandoning them to the Taliban. So, having Labour been so soft and woolly on this language would suggest they're going to continue a similar approach. What we have seen even back in the 2019 election is Labour taking a much more anti-immigration stance. I'm not expecting a great change. They are triangulating the Tories on one policy after another." And that article was in exclusive by Steph Braun.
The National Politics on Wednesday the 26th of June. Edinburgh Council U-turns on a Taiwan friendship deal over China sanctions fear. An article written by Donald Turville. The City of Edinburgh Council has shelved plans for a new friendship agreement with a Taiwanese city following fears it could harm relations with China. The local authority was due to consider a 5-year partnership to strengthen cultural and commercial links between the Scottish capital and Kaohsiung, but plans have been dropped from this week's council agenda. Organisations including the University of Edinburgh, Edinburgh Airport and the Edinburgh Chamber of Commerce have warned that the move could result in sanctions on the city and reduced trade, tourism and student numbers. A report also raised concerns that it could lead to an increased risk of cyber attack. Taiwan considers itself an independent nation and largely functions as one currently. However, this view is not shared by China, and in most other countries, including the United States and the UK, the island's political status is contentious. A report admitted that the arrangement does pose potential risks for the city's relationship with China, but that these risks are difficult to quantify with confidence. It added that the current threat level to the council of a cyber attack remained very high, and signing the arrangement could increase these risks. Council leader Cami Day, who has spearheaded efforts to strengthen relations between Edinburgh and Taiwan, visited Kaohsiung and Taipei on a Taiwanese government-funded trip last year. In August, he secured agreement from councillors to work towards a memorandum of understanding between Taiwan and the appropriate city partners. This has since changed to a friendship arrangement built on a principle of mutual benefit. This would seek to strengthen commercial and innovation cooperation and enrich the cultural and artistic life of both cities. Mr. Day said, having taken on board the views of the business community and other partners, they had decided more discussion is required before taking this agreement forward. He said, "We'll continue this dialogue and report back to a future council meeting. In the meantime, I remain in no doubt that developing these types of relationships with progressive and open-minded cities like ours is absolutely the right thing to do for the people of Edinburgh." China's representative in Edinburgh told councillors that he had grave concerns about a sister city agreement between Edinburgh and cities from Taiwan. In a letter sent earlier this month, Consul General Zhang Biao wrote, "This is not an action simply to promote exchange and friendship. It is deeply related to the Taiwan question and will bring about serious consequences." The Chinese government firmly opposes countries that have diplomatic ties with China to conduct official exchanges with Taiwan in any form, including signing agreement with sovereign implications or of an official nature. Mr. Zhang said the Council signing a friendship arrangement with Taiwan will hurt the feeling of the Chinese people and bring about serious consequences to our bilateral relations, which we do not want to see. He added, surely Edinburgh would benefit little but lose a lot from such action. Letters of support were received from the Kaohsiung City Government, the Taipei Representative Office in the United Kingdom, and the Scotland Taiwanese Association. But several organisations urged the Council not to sign the arrangement. A spokesman for Edinburgh Airport said the Council's draft report had a lack of detail about the potential impact of the risks that were alluded to. A range of things were mentioned, such as the current relationship with China and the benefits it brings, and we felt it would be wise for all of us to better understand the potential extent of the risk involved to allow all of us to make a fully informed decision, he said. Conservative group leader Ian White said that the local authority should focus on improving the vital local services it provides rather than dabbling ineffectually in international politics. He added, it's obvious that this needed far more thought before being brought forward as a formal proposal. The pause is helpful as it will allow the Council to engage more widely should any proposal return. It's time to focus on Edinburgh people's priorities. An article written by Donald Turville. The National News on Wednesday the 26th of June. Human remains found in a burnt-out van in East Ayrshire. An article written by Gregor Young. Human remains have been discovered in a burnt-out van on a picturesque road outside a Scottish village, sparking a police appeal. Officers said the remains were found after reports of a vehicle on fire just after midday on Monday outside the Ayrshire village of New Milnes. The van was in a lay-by on a single-track road between Priestland and Darvel in the Galston Moor area, known locally as Monk Belt or Mast Walk. Police said that the remains have not been formally identified, and for now the death is being treated as unexplained. Officers said that their inquiries are at an early stage to establish the full circumstances. Detective Inspector Craig Gilmore said, "At this stage of our investigation, it's unclear why the van was parked in this lay-by or how it came to be on fire. It's vital that anyone with information comes forward. The area is very picturesque and popular with walkers and dog walkers, and it's thought a number of vehicles will have passed by the scene at the time. We are appealing for anyone who was in the area around midday on Monday and may have seen a white van parked in a lay-by or a van on fire to please get in touch. I would also ask if you heard any loud noises or if any motorists with dashcam footage which could be of significance to please get in touch." An article written by Gregor Young. The National on Wednesday the 26th of June. Opinion. How can Scotland cut down on waste? when it seems that nothing is built to last. A column written by Shona Craven. The timing could not have been better. As a fire raged at an electronic waste facility near Paisley, campaigners piled up electronic waste outside the Scottish Parliament as part of a push for stronger circular economy legislation. They are seeking to put pressure on MSPs to include plans for recycling minerals and metals such as copper, cobalt and lithium, which are used in phones, laptops and renewable energy infrastructure. Any residents of Paisley and the surrounding areas who didn't have concerns about Scotland's ability to deal with electronic waste before Sunday night will surely be pondering it now, especially after the Fire Brigades Union in Scotland said it had concerns about the speed of the introduction of technology and the regulations around electric vehicles, battery storage, etc. The weekend's fire came hot on the heels of another at a battery recycling centre in Kilwinning in April. Questions must be asked and answered. Consideration should surely be given to relocating such facilities further away from residential areas. Friends of the Earth Scotland didn't have to look far for donations to stage their Holyrood stunt. They simply asked around, and plenty of people offered up old phones, monitors and cables. Had they asked me, I could have contributed a few items myself from the last couple of months alone. As the summer festival season approaches, I've been digging out my power banks and testing my chargers. I found that a travel adapter I bought less than a year ago, £17 directly from Samsung, has given up the ghost, as has a connector, £2.50 from Poundland, that was needed to use headphones with the same device. A bumbag-sized power bank now provides less than a 10% boost to my phone's charge and becomes alarmingly hot while doing so. As consumers, we want to make the right choices to save both money and waste, and also to avoid inconvenience or even potentially dangerous situations. The effectiveness of, say, a 10,000 mAh power bank could make all the difference to someone who gets lost or disorientated, or finds themselves without cash or a map when these are urgently required. But where is the regulation for such devices, and as customers are we too willing to accept that we must upgrade our tech on a regular basis and try not to think too much about what happens to the old stuff? It's great that sustainable shopping has become a fashionable choice for young folk, and online platforms allow even the bulkiest of unwanted electronics to be resold or given away locally, rather than binned. But it's ironic that these platforms are mostly accessed via smartphones, which a cynic would suggest are designed to become obsolete, not just because of advances in technology, but also because elements such as batteries degrade over time and cannot easily or cheaply be replaced. I recall the days when I would head off on my travels with spare phone batteries, and my dismay when I later learned that all new phones were sealed. The salesman mentioning something about waterproofing. Tell that to my current phone, which screams at me if there's a trace of moisture in the socket when I plug it in to charge. The smartphone dependency genie cannot be put back in the bottle, but digital solutions can end up creating new problems. I noted with interest that National Express, in an email about a festival bus service, urged travellers to print out their tickets rather than rely on their phones after 5 days of living in a field. More often these days, we are bossily told to help save the planet by not printing, something that wouldn't even occur to those, the majority surely, who have no access to home printing facilities anyway. Personal printers are no longer the norm because there's less need for them, but also because the cost of ink cartridges is ridiculously high. The EU has been working to address unsustainable practices by printer manufacturers, such as the use of chips that prevent compatible refillable cartridges being used instead of expensive branded ones. Last year, it also adopted new regulations that will require smartphones to have replaceable batteries by 2027. If the battery removal requires a specialised tool, they will be required to provide those free of charge. Of course, manufacturers might still produce impenetrable devices for non-EU markets, ours included, alas, but the hope is that they will make all of their products easier to repair. They will undoubtedly find new ways to fleece us, but let's hope that they compete to earn the most sustainable badge of honour. We all have a role to play in reducing waste, but it's not easy when nothing is built to last. And to add injury to insult, even once you've disposed of the junk, it might end up coming for your lungs. A column written by Shona Craven. The National, on Wednesday the 26th of June. Opinion. Labour's plans for nuclear expansion in Scotland are flying under the radar. A column written by George Caravan. Labour is planning a big expansion of nuclear power in the UK and in Scotland. Of course, as with much else in the party's intentions, this is being sneaked in under the political radar. However, a close reading of the manifestos of both UK Labour and its Scottish branch office clearly gives the game away. And prominent candidates such as Douglas Alexander in Lothian East are being very vocal in support of nuclear energy when speaking at election hustings. Why is this worrying? Because apart from the undemocratic secrecy involved, Labour's nuclear fixation is expensive for the taxpayer and the electricity consumer. And because this strategy compromises the safety of everyone living in Scotland. The reason: Labour is dicing with new, unproven nuclear generating technology called small modular reactors, or SMRs. Scotland could be the guinea pig for SMRs at the existing nuclear plant at Torness in East Lothian, which is why Scottish Labour have to come clean on its plans for new nukes. UK Labour's general election manifesto has this to say about Sir Keir Starmer's proposals. Labour will end a decade of dithering that has seen the Conservatives duck decisions on nuclear power. We will ensure the long-term security of the sector, extending the lifetime of existing plants, and we will get Hinkley Point C over the line. New nuclear power stations such as Sizewell C and small modular reactors will play an important role in helping the UK achieve energy security and clean power while securing thousands of good, skilled jobs. That's clear. Labour will keep and expand nuclear electricity generation. As well as new plants, the life of existing ones will be extended. Currently, the station at Torness, which is owned by EDF, the French state-owned generator, is scheduled to close in March 2028. But earlier this year, EDF announced it was reviewing the closure plan. The company wants to squeeze as much profit from its investment and is hoping an incoming Labour government will give it the regulatory go-ahead to extend the life of the 2 reactors on site, which have been operating since 1989. Labour's manifesto suggests this is a racing certainty. But EDF has long harboured plans to build a new Torness B plant at the same location. Indeed, Labour's local MSP for Torness, Martin Whitfield, has been calling for the SNP government to drop its dogmatic opposition to nuclear and let Torness B go ahead. Against this political background, the careful wording of the manifesto from Scottish Labour gives the game away. Labour will end a decade of dithering that has seen the Conservatives duck decisions on nuclear power, while the SNP opposes its development in Scotland completely. Nuclear power currently provides up to 23% of the electricity consumed in Scotland and will need to remain part of our energy mix if we are to achieve energy security and clean power in Scotland. Scottish Labour believes Scotland should not miss out on the economic opportunity that nuclear energy offers. Advanced planning has already begun under the current Tory regime. Only last month, Scottish Secretary Alistair Jack told a House of Lords committee that the UK government was planning to build a new nuclear reactor in Scotland. He revealed that he'd already asked Tory Energy Minister Justin Tomlinson to start planning for this. Crucially, Mr Jack told the peers that he had specified the possibility for locating an SMR in Scotland. The existing Torness plant is the only logical place to put a new SMR atomic power station complex in Scotland. Torness has the management and facilities. Above all, it's located astride the transmission lines to England, which are being upgraded and modernised to carry power from the giant offshore wind farms that make landfall on the coast of East Lothian, just adjacent to Torness itself. All you have to do is to station SMRs at Torness and plug into the grid. It's obvious that the incoming Labour government will inherit the advanced Tory work on putting SMRs into Torness. To quote the Scottish Labour manifesto again, small modular reactors will play an important role in helping the UK achieve clean power while securing thousands of good, skilled jobs. Scottish Labour believes Scotland should not miss out. A logical plan would be for a Labour Secretary of State for Scotland to give EDF the go-ahead to extend the life of the existing but ageing gas-cooled reactors at Torness, while pushing ahead to put a bunch of SMRs beside them. So what could possibly go wrong? Firstly, it would be nice if Douglas Alexander, clearly a shoo-in for a big cabinet post in any Starmer administration, was more honest with the electorate about these plans. Secondly, SMR technology remains unproven, to say the least. The idea is to package a small nuclear reactor in a big box, but there is as yet no agreed way to do this. In fact, there are lots of competing technologies. Cue a Labour government spending a fortune of our money pursuing this will-o'-the-wisp for decades. The original idea was to place SMRs in localities to provide district power, but imagine the safety and security implications of spreading half a dozen mini-nuclear stations across Glasgow or Edinburgh. The problems inherent with operating one big plant are difficult enough. In 2020, the official Office for Nuclear Regulation worried that cracks at Torness could lead to a radiation leak if not dealt with. This prompted EDF to bring forward the plant's closure date by 2 years. Now, suppose there were 20 or 30 new SMRs spread across Scotland and the UK. The probability of something going wrong goes exponential. So expect a bunch of SMRs to be shoehorned into Torness. Even then, you would still get a multiplication in the potential for operating problems, except they'd all be in East Lothian. There's also another local problem in East Lothian. The upgrading of the transmission system has prompted a rash of planning applications in the county to build new battery storage and solar farms, potentially covering thousands of acres of prime farmland. The existing construction work is already causing significant road congestion and loss of amenity. Add an SMR farm and this congestion will reach gridlock. And it's not as if East Lothian is getting many jobs as a result, or cheap electricity. Labour's election energy plans are largely bogus. Their proposed GB Energy company is just a big investment vehicle that will give cheap loans, subsidised by the taxpayer, to foreign power monopolies. Any jobs in GB Energy will go to City of London investment managers and not Scottish engineers. What Scotland needs is a state-owned power company like EDF, and more investment in local construction and production of genuine green energy, rather than Labour's hidden plans for more nuclear power in Scotland. We need a genuine, open public debate about the merits and demerits of nuclear energy. Sadly, Douglas Alexander is staying stum. A column written by George Caravan. The National Politics on Wednesday the 26th of June. Health Secretary says the Tories would make gender identity a reserved issue. An article written by Ross Hunter. The UK Health Secretary has said that the Conservative Party would seek to weaken the devolution settlement by making gender recognition a reserved matter across the whole of the UK. Speaking at a press conference on Tuesday morning, Victoria Atkins said that the Tories would not allow the SNP to cause confusion by passing gender reform legislation, despite health being a devolved issue. We're insisting that someone can only have one sex throughout the whole of the United Kingdom, she said. It's not enough for some of us to be protected. We should feel safe no matter where we live or where we were born. We will not allow Labour or the SNP to cause confusion across the UK with ill-thought-through policies on gender. It comes after the UK government blocked the Gender Recognition Reform Scotland Bill, which was passed by a cross-party majority in Holyrood. Ms Atkins also cast doubt on the Scottish Government's proposals to ban conversion therapy, taking aim at the Labour Party's promise to do so if they form the next government. In 2018, then Prime Minister Theresa May promised to ban conversion therapy, which refers to practices that seek to repress or change a person's sexuality or gender identity. However, the proposed ban eventually came to exclude transgender people before being dropped by the UK government entirely. Meanwhile, Sir Keir Starmer said that a Labour government would legislate for a trans-inclusive ban. Despite describing conversion therapy as dreadful, Ms Atkins cast doubt on whether banning it was necessary. Today it has seeped out that Labour not only wants to introduce self-identification by stealth, but also wants to stop parents, teachers and therapists from comforting and counselling children and adults who are in gender distress, she said. We all agree that so-called conversion therapy in the context of sexuality is dreadful and must be stopped. However, we need a thoughtful conversation about whether additional legislation is necessary and possible, without criminalising those who are doing their best to support people with gender distress. This is ripe territory for the law of unintended consequences, which is something you'd think the Labour leader would understand, but clearly does not. The Scottish Government's consultation on banning conversion practices closed back in April, with an official response expected before the summer recess. An article written by Ross Hunter.
The National, Thursday the 27th of June, from the news section. Charges for single-use coffee cups on table as Holyrood passes bill. New legislation that could bring in charges for single-use coffee cups as well as fines for those who deliberately contaminate recycling have been passed at Holyrood. MSPs have approved by 116 votes to 0 the Circular Economy Scotland Bill, which introduces a series of measures aimed at reducing waste and also ensuring households and businesses dispose of their rubbish in the correct way. While this could see people issued with fixed penalty notice for putting the wrong items in their bins, Climate Action Minister Gillian Martin sought to reassure Scots. She said these would be used to deal with repeat, persistent offenders, insisting it was not for the people who want to do the right thing and have made a mistake. Instead, Martin said the fixed penalty notices would be for those who have deliberately contaminated recycling waste. Among its measures, the legislation will ban the disposal of unsold goods, preventing companies from sending products which have not been bought to landfill, with ministers to be given the power to set local recycling targets. Other parts of the bill could result in charges being brought in for single-use items such as coffee cups, while car and van drivers could be fined if anyone is caught littering from their vehicle. Martin said there was a real need to accelerate our efforts on the circular economy, adding that the bill would embed thinking on this in the government. We're all consumers. We must play our part in reducing waste, she said. That's why this bill is so far-reaching. It impacts us all, from the goods we buy to what we put in our recycling bins. Scottish Greens co-leader Lorna Slater said the bill was a significant step forward, adding it would help bring about changes so it is no longer acceptable to casually extract materials to make items that will be used only once or just a few times and then thrown away. Slater, who had been a circular economy minister when the Greens were still in the Scottish Government, said the bill enabled ministers to introduce measures such as charges on single-use items. She said the measure of success in this bill lies not simply in passing it, but in taking up the powers it conveys and putting in place practical actions. However, both the Tories and Labour said the legislation could have been better. Scottish Conservative MSP Maurice Golden said while his party backed the bill's general principles, the legislation lacks the ambition we need to build a sustainable economy and see it thrive. The Tories said, even after a decade of trying, the SNP still haven't managed to deliver on their 2013 household recycling target. And their new approach is the same strategy they have been reusing for the past 2 years. He argued bold and decisive action was needed, calling on the Scottish Government to take a more constructive approach to tackle this issue. Labour's Sarah Boyack said, I don't think the bill is as good as it could have been. My personal view is I still think it is a missed opportunity because the bill is more about recycling waste management than seizing the opportunity to deliver the circular economy our constituents, our businesses and our planet needs. This was an article by Xander Eliards. The National, Thursday the 27th of June from the news section. Video shows 150,000 bees discovered living in the ceiling of a Highland home. More than 150,000 bees have been discovered living in the ceiling at a home in the Highlands. The Loch Ness Honey Company were called by the homeowners in Inverness after they discovered a swarm of bees in their home. Beekeeper Andrew Card was tasked with rescuing the bees and discovered 3 different colonies living in the house. Each colony had around 50 to 60,000 bees, and they were inhabiting the ceilings above the bedroom, bathroom and living room. Card managed to find 2 queens, but was unable to find the third, as he believed it was due to the time of the season. Speaking to STV, Card said, each colony was bigger than we estimated. I would say 50 to 60,000 in each of the 3 colonies. We located the queen of 2 of them. The third one we didn't manage, but I think it's because of the season. Then she's been slow to mate because there weren't any eggs in there either. We've recovered all the bees and the household is now satisfied that we've done a good job, he added. Card then explained the rescue bees will be relocated to a remote apiary, also known as a bee yard, and monitored for diseases. He also added that the Loch Ness Honey Company will do its best to look after the bees. He said, we've relocated the bees to one of our apiaries, so we have an isolation apiary. Any swarms or any kind of unknown bees that we come across, we've put into an isolation apiary. We monitor them for about 6 weeks for diseases. We feed them up to make sure they're nice and healthy, and then we overwinter them, and that will be next year's honey production colonies then. We try and do our best to look after them. Pollinators on the whole have taken a huge impact in the last few years. We're also seeing big losses with the honeybees this year because of the type of winter that was suffering longer than normal. That was an article by Alasdair Ferguson.
This is from The National on Thursday, 27th June 2024. From the Culture section. Martin Lewis slaps down Tories after they use him in a campaign clip. By Gregor Young. Martin Lewis has slapped down the Conservatives after they used a clip of him to campaign against Labour in the general election. Sharing a video of the money-saving expert on social media, Rishi Sunak's party suggested it was proof Labour were planning to put up taxes after taking power at Westminster. The clip showed Lewis saying, I had a conversation with a senior member of the Labour Party, a private conversation, as I do with both parties. The exact phrase they used with me is, when I was asked about a particular policy, they said, we're not putting it in our manifesto because I can't commit we'll do it, but it is my aim we will do it over the next Parliament. Sharing the video, the Tories wrote, they're not telling you the full truth. Labour have said they wouldn't put up your taxes, but now it's becoming clear that they have every intention to put them up. However, Lewis has called out the Conservatives for using him in their campaign, saying the conversation and the policy he was referring to had nothing to do with taxes. Nowhere in this comment do I talk about taxes, the ITV host said. And the policy that I discussed, I will keep private as it was private, was not about taxes or tax rises. It was about something that would be a positive change. James Withers, the former chief executive of Scotland Food and Drink, commented, "Truly extraordinary. Just when you think history's worst ever election campaign has peaked, the Tories pick a tax fight with Martin Lewis, Britain's most trusted financial advisor." Lewis's intervention was also added as a community note on the Conservatives' post on Twitter X. However, others said that it was concerning that Labour were hiding policies from voters at all. The neutrals' clear takeaway is that there are things they want to do that are being kept well under the long Victorian skirt of Sue Gray, and she's not even for showing a bit of ankle, one user wrote. That article was by Gregor Young. This is from The National on Thursday, 27th June 2024. From the Culture section. Sabrina Carpenter goes from support act to superstar in record time. By Kelly Given. If you haven't heard the song Espresso, even just in passing over the last few weeks, I am unsure if I'm jealous or think you're missing out. The likelihood is, even if you don't know it by name, you will almost certainly have heard the chorus against your will. If the words, "I'm working late 'cause I'm a singer," doesn't low-key traumatise you at this point, you must be seriously unplugged. It has dominated TikTok, the charts, streaming platforms and the radio since its release back in April, and has even been tipped as 2024's Song of the Summer. It was closely followed by Sabrina Carpenter's follow-up release, Please, 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 which has quite incredibly been just as popular, currently sitting at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, a first for the 25-year-old artist. What's interesting is that Carpenter isn't a new face. She's been on the scene for quite some time, starting as a child Disney star. She released her debut album, Eyes Wide Open, all the way back in 2015. But it would be some 9 years later before she enjoyed international success on the scale we're seeing now. Her sound has definitely matured from bubblegum pop to the more sophisticated and versatile version that's proving to be the soundtrack of the summer, which is at least somewhat responsible for the spike in her success. But it's a journey that could be pegged as unusual when you compare it to the likes of Olivia Rodrigo, who became an overnight sensation with little time to prepare. I find it preferable, actually. She is an artist that hasn't just been lucky with TikTok exposure, but one who has worked hard over a long period of time to perfect her sound and her market, and who has ultimately hit the ball out of the park with her strategy. Merging influence from various genres like pop, R&B, and even folk and indie, she is appealing to a much wider and more receptive audience than she was with her earlier work, and that was her exact intention. Aside from her 2 biggest releases so far, tracks like Skinny Dipping and Fast Times have showcased her knack for catchy melodies and lyrics, while simultaneously exploring deeper themes of empowerment, and the seamless transition between genres keeps every release fresh and exciting to a whole world of listeners, literally. I won't pretend her recent stardom has skyrocketed completely out of nowhere. She was, of course, Taylor Swift's supporting act on the Australian leg of the record-breaking Eras tour that catapulted her exposure, and ultimately saw her knock Swift's own Fortnight off the global Spotify top spot back in April. One of the most extreme examples of supporting artist turning global competition I've ever seen. A leg up that was exploited to perfection by her team. Her auntie is also Nancy Cartwright, otherwise known as the voice of Bart Simpson, so it's not like she's had trouble making connections in the industry. But the Song of the Summer is a difficult accolade to perfect. It has to be relatable to a wide audience, contain memorable lyrics that even the most unlikely of fans can't shake off, no matter how hard they try, and needs to encompass its audience in the warm, fuzzy feeling of how it literally feels to be on the beach with your friends sipping on a cold drink. Couple that with some heavyweight competition, though her main competition at the moment is undoubtedly herself. I doubt she cares too much which of her songs take home the crown, and both are proving to be worthy of it. It's a niche very few have perfected, and an impressive achievement for a relatively unestablished singer to get a hole-in-one right out of the gate, only to follow it in her second round with another. It proves, though, that when it comes down to it, chart music is feeble and the established hierarchy can be bent out of shape with the emergence of a new favourite at any given moment. Yesterday's nobody can very quickly become tomorrow's Madison Square Garden headliner, with the right combination of melody and memorable lyric. It's probably why someone with as versatile a repertoire as Carpenter has enjoyed so much concurrent success all summer. As bizarre as it sounds, given that she is now a multimillionaire international popstar, she is relatable. And that's what the masses are looking for more than anything from celebrity influence in 2024. With increasing access to the lives, homes and personalities of celebrities, the filtered, out-of-reach Kardashian-style appeal has dropped off in favour of more relatable and unpolished personalities that young people feel a connection to in one way or another. Especially amongst the young girls, who are often the machine operators pulling the strings when it comes to TikTok and online fame. Whether she's singing unapologetically about the complexities of modern relationships, or navigating rumours and gossip, her music as well as her style and personality feel current and relatable. Like it or not, those who want superstardom on this level have to impress that market above most others, one of the most, if not the most, powerful forces in pop culture terms as it stands. They will make or break an artist and have indulged in both in recent years. Carpenter has watched, listened, taken notes and acted accordingly, it seems. Though I might not have chosen to enjoy Sabrina Carpenter's music, I am glad it was so violently forced upon me. It's been a while since a real feel-good, lightweight summer song has really grasped my attention. But I'm definitely listening and looking forward to seeing what more this Polly Pocket-esque powerhouse of a young woman has in store in the coming months. That article was by Kelly Given.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels, review, and to tell your friends about our service.